Long ago, in the heart of West Africa, where the sun dipped low over endless stretches of savanna and the Niger River curved like a sleeping serpent, there rose an empire unlike any other, the Empire of Mali. Born of trade, blessed by gold, and ruled by kings whose names shimmered across the desert sands, Mali was more than a kingdom. It was a rhythm, a breath, a slow and steady heartbeat in the ancient world. As the night settles and you close your eyes, imagine the world in the 13th century. Imagine wide plains filled with grazing herds and soft winds. The sound of distant drums echoes through the dusk as the last light reflects off the domed rooftops of a city built from earth and stone, Timbuktu. And somewhere within those walls, a scholar dips his pen into ink, recording the words of the day. But the story of Mali begins not in the cities, but in the memory of a man named Sundiata. He was the Lion King of Mali, a prince born with weakness in his legs, but strength in his will. Legends say he could not walk as a child, yet he later stood tall enough to unite a dozen small kingdoms and forge them into one mighty realm. The Mandinka people told his story in song, passing his legacy from griot to griot, word by sacred word. Under Sundiata's rule, Mali expanded from humble beginnings into a land of stability, justice, and unity. He established laws remembered for generations, and he built a capital at Niani, a city nestled by the river, shaded by baobabs, and filled with laughter and life. Markets blossomed, salt from the Sahara and gold from the southern forests flowed like water through Mali's hands. It became the crossroads of Africa. Now breathe slowly. Feel the rhythm of caravan hooves against the sand. For hundreds of miles, traders crossed the desert, silent lines of camels bearing salt bricks, glass beads, silks, and stories, and always, always gold. Mali was home to some of the richest gold mines on earth, and from them came the substance that made kings into legends. And no king shone brighter than Mansa Musa. He was not the founder of Mali, but he became its brightest star. When Musa ruled in the early 14th century, Mali stretched farther than it ever had before, reaching from the Atlantic coast to the heart of the Sahara. He was wise, devout, and astonishingly wealthy. But what the world remembers most is the journey. In the year 1324, Mansa Musa set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca. It was his Hajj, a sacred duty of his Islamic faith. But Musa did not travel alone. His caravan stretched farther than the eye could see. Thousands of attendants, soldiers, slaves, and scholars. He brought with him camels weighed down with gold dust. So much gold, in fact, that when he passed through Cairo, he spent so freely that the value of gold in Egypt dropped for over a decade. Historians in Europe, in Arabia, and across Africa wrote about him. Mapmakers who had never seen Mali etched his image onto their parchment, drawing a black king crowned in gold, holding a scepter and orb. And still, Musa remained humble. He built mosques along his journey, gave generously to the poor, and brought back architects and scholars to enrich his homeland. Close your eyes and walk with him through Timbuktu upon his return. Picture the grand mosque of Djingareyber rising from the red earth, its wooden beams casting long shadows in the morning sun. Imagine the libraries filled with scrolls and books, handwritten in Arabic and African scripts, poetry, law, science, and faith. Mali was not only a place of trade, but of knowledge, of learning, of light. And yet, Musa aged. As all things do, Time moved forward, and new kings followed. Some were strong, others were less so. But Mali endured for generations. Its wealth and order impressed travelers from far-off lands. One such traveler, Ibn Battuta, a Moroccan explorer, visited Mali and wrote of its beauty, its justice, and its cleanliness. He described the people as devout, respectful, and generous, and he marveled at the empire's power. But all empires change. Trade routes shifted, rivals rose. The Songhai Empire, once a province of Mali, would grow strong and one day take its place. But Mali's heartbeat never truly faded. Its name, its kings, and its legacy live on in story, in memory, and now in your dreams. So let the desert wind carry you, soft and warm. Let the echoes of griots lull you into sleep. You are in the land of gold and kings, where knowledge grew beside the river, and where night falls over the savannah, calm and eternal. The empire of Mali, once golden and grand, rests now beneath the stars, forever whispering its story to those who listen. Let the night take you south along the Nile, past the sandstone cliffs and the whispering reeds, beyond the great temples of Egypt, until the stars reflect gently in the river's curve near a land called Nubia. It is here that the kingdom of Kush once rose, an ancient African empire with kings who wore the crowns of the pharaohs and temples carved with stories lost to time. Long before the name Kush was spoken in distant lands, the people of Nubia lived in harmony with the river. They were skilled archers, traders, and farmers, their homes nestled between the desert and the fertile floodplains. The Nile was their lifeline, its waters rising and falling with the breath of the land. And there, in the city of Kerma, the first glimmer of greatness appeared. Kerma grew rich from trade, gold from the southern hills, incense, ivory, and cattle passed through its markets. Its people built enormous burial mounds and crafted pottery more refined than any found in Egypt. And though the Egyptians would later call them rivals or rebels, the Kushites were never simply a shadow of their neighbors. They had their own gods, their own language, and a deep pride rooted in the soil. But history is not always peaceful. Around 1500 BCE, Egypt conquered Kush and ruled over it for centuries. Temples to Amun rose in Nubian lands, and the people adopted some customs of the pharaohs. But even as Egypt claimed victory, the heart of Kush remained unbroken. Over time, Egypt weakened, its grip slipped, and from the south, Kush rose again, stronger, wiser, and ready. Close your eyes now and drift forward to the 8th century BCE. The capital of Kush has moved north to Napata, near the base of a sacred mountain. It is night, and the sound of drums echoes in the dark. Fires burn near the temple steps as priests raid the stars. A new king is crowned, not only as ruler of Kush, but as pharaoh of Egypt. His name is Pa. Pa believed in unity, in one divine land under one rule, from Nubia to the Nile Delta. His army marched north, not in rage, but in resolve. He conquered the divided cities of Egypt, not through destruction, but through reverence, offering sacrifices to Egyptian gods, restoring temples, and honoring sacred traditions. The people called him a liberator. And so began the 25th dynasty, the dynasty of the Black Pharaohs. Imagine now the throne room of Thebes, Egyptian officials bowing to a king whose skin was dark as the soil and whose voice carried the quiet authority of the river. His brothers and sons would follow him, Shebitku, Shabaka, Taharka, and Tanutamani, all rulers from Cush, all pharaohs of Egypt. One of the greatest among them was Taharka. Under his reign, Egypt and Cush flourished together. Temples were restored, walls were built, peace returned. But peace, as always, was fragile. From the northeast came a new power, the Assyrians, fierce and unrelenting. They stormed into Egypt with iron and fire. Despite brave resistance, the Cushite pharaohs were pushed back, returning south to their homeland. But their empire did not end. It transformed. Move now in your mind's eye to Meroe, the new capital of Cush, a city of stone and learning, set between the desert and a river full of life. The air is dry and sweet. The pyramids here are steep and narrow, dozens of them rising like silent guardians over royal tombs. Women walk with water jars balanced on their heads. Children run through the fields, and at the palace gates, a queen stands tall, the Kandake. Cush was one of the few ancient kingdoms where queens ruled in their own right. These powerful women, Kandakes or Candaces, led armies, signed treaties, and were honored in stone and song. One queen famously faced down the Romans, who sought to conquer Nubia after Egypt had fallen into their hands. She negotiated peace on her terms, and Rome respected her strength. The kingdom of Cush thrived in Meroe for centuries. Its people wrote in Meroitic script, still undeciphered today. They worshipped gods old and new, crafted fine iron tools, and traded deep into Africa and beyond. But eventually, time wore down even the strongest walls. Trade routes shifted, deserts spread, and the empire faded. Yet even in silence, Cush speaks. Its pyramids still stand, though fewer know their names. Its kings and queens, once rulers of two lands, whisper now in the stone. The Nile still flows past their temples, and the stars still shine on the places where they dreamed. So as you rest tonight, picture the black-robed priests walking beneath moonlit colonnades. Hear the gentle splash of oars on the river. Let your mind drift to a land where African kings ruled Egypt and African queens held empires in their hands. The kingdom of Cush, powerful and proud, rests beneath the southern sky, eternal in memory and now in dreams. As the sun sets over the rolling hills of southern Africa, a gentle wind stirs the dry grass. In the distance, among acacia trees and granite outcrops, stone walls begin to emerge from the landscape, massive, curved, and ancient. These walls, unmortared and yet still standing, belong to a place of legend, a city without equal in the southern continent. Tonight, you drift toward Great Zimbabwe. The name Zimbabwe means house of stone in the language of the Shona people, and truly, it was a city built from stone, not carved into it, but shaped by it. No cement, no binding material, just human hands and vision, fitting granite blocks so precisely that they held for centuries. In a time before concrete and steel, Great Zimbabwe rose, bold and beautiful, from the very earth it ruled. Close your eyes now and travel back to the 11th century. Africa was changing. Trade routes stretched like veins across the continent. Ivory, gold, and beads flowed north to the Swahili coast, where merchants from Arabia and India waited with cloth, porcelain, and spices. And inland, in a land of hills and rivers, a kingdom was born. Great Zimbabwe was not the capital of a fleeting tribe. It was the heart of an empire, stretching over hundreds of kilometers. The city itself was vast, with separate enclosures rising from the granite hills. The great enclosure, with its 11-meter-high walls and graceful tower, stands as one of the largest ancient structures south of the Sahara. No kings carved their names into stone, no battles are recorded, but the silence of Zimbabwe speaks louder than conquest. Archaeologists have found beads from India, glass from the Middle East, and Chinese ceramics among the ruins. This was a city connected to the world. Caravans carried gold and ivory from the interior to the coast, where Swahili ports like Kilwa Kiswani waited. From there, the goods would travel across the Indian Ocean to the markets of Asia. Zimbabwe was not isolated, it was central. Imagine the city in its prime, the sun rising over the hill complex, where religious rituals echoed off stone walls, smoke curling from hearths in the valley below, women pounding grain, children laughing, couriers arriving with news from distant provinces. At the heart of it all, a king, known as the Mambo, seated beneath a shade tree, advising elders, hearing petitions, and offering wisdom. But Zimbabwe's power wasn't only in gold or trade, it was spiritual. The hill complex, perched high above, may have been a royal sanctuary, a place of ancestors and spirit mediums. The people believed in a world where the living and the dead walked side by side. Birds carved in soapstone, some with eagle heads and human feet, were placed on pedestals to watch over the city. These birds, symbols of protection and power, would later become national emblems. There were no written records, no books or scrolls, but memory lived in oral tradition, passed down by the Shona from generation to generation. They told stories of a place where kings ruled with fairness, where walls rose without mortar, and where spirit and soil were forever bound. But like all things, great Zimbabwe changed. By the 15th century, the city began to decline. Perhaps it was drought, perhaps overgrazing, deforestation, or political shifts. Or maybe, as the capital of a growing empire, it simply moved. Other cities, such as Kami and Mutapa, rose in its place, continuing the legacy but in different forms. The once bustling stone corridors grew quiet. Grass reclaimed the courtyards. Birds nested in towers once filled with voices. When Europeans first saw the ruins in the 19th century, they refused to believe that Africans had built such grandeur. Myths spread of foreign builders, lost tribes, or ancient outsiders. But slowly, surely, truth reclaimed its place. Archaeology, oral history, and respect restored the story to the people of Zimbabwe. It had always been theirs, and now it becomes yours too. As you drift deeper into sleep, picture the moonlight casting soft shadows on stone walls. Feel the warm air rising from the savanna. Hear the distant hum of insects and the slow rhythm of a land at peace. Great Zimbabwe may no longer hum with footsteps and trade, but it endures in its stones, in the care with which each block was laid, and in the quiet dignity of its design. Tonight, the house of stone sleeps. Its birds still watch, and the wind that moves through the tall grass whispers of kings, ancestors, and a people who once built greatness from granite and spirit alone. As night settles gently over the forests of West Africa, a hush falls over the trees. Somewhere beyond the palm groves and the red earth paths, torches flicker along ancient walls. You are approaching Benin, not the modern country, but the mighty kingdom of old, where art and royalty lived side by side, and the walls of the capital stretched farther than the Great Wall of China. It is the 13th century. You walk into a world of precision and order, of bronze and belief. The Kingdom of Benin, located in what is now southern Nigeria, rose from the legacy of earlier societies and was ruled by kings known as Obas. These kings did not claim divinity, but they were seen as the bridge between the spiritual and the earthly. Their word was law, and their palace, the heart of the city, was where history, ceremony, and judgment all came together. Imagine a city unlike any other in medieval Europe. Benin City was vast and organized, with wide streets laid out in straight lines, noble districts, and a massive royal compound built of wood, mud, and shining brass. Surrounding the city were monumental earthworks, moats, and ramparts that ran for thousands of kilometers. These defenses were dug by hand over centuries, part of a system that protected the kingdom and showcased its engineering brilliance. Now picture the Oba's court. The air is thick with incense. Courtiers in coral-beaded regalia bow low, speaking in proverbs and riddles. Musicians play ivory horns and iron gongs. And on a high seat sits the Oba, dressed in flowing robes, his face serene, his voice firm. The Oba was not just a ruler. He was a symbol, a custodian of the ancestors, a protector of the land, and the heartbeat of the kingdom. But it is through the bronzes that Benin's memory shines most brightly. Artisans of the royal guilds created some of the finest metalwork the world has ever seen. Detailed plaques, lifelike heads, and ceremonial objects cast using the lost wax method. These works were not mere decoration. They recorded battles, ceremonies, royal lineages, and scenes of daily life. They told the story of a people in shimmering detail, warriors in leopard skins, queens seated in grace, the Oba between the sun and the earth. The Benin bronzes adorned the palace walls, telling a visual history that needed no writing. And though these bronzes were created to glorify power, they also preserved culture. They captured the faces of people long gone, the designs of ancient armor, and even the musical instruments once played beneath the moon. Trade helped Benin flourish. By the 15th century, Portuguese sailors arrived on the West African coast. They were greeted not by villages, but by a sophisticated court with diplomats and gold weights. They marveled at the order and beauty of Benin City. Soon, trade routes connected the kingdom to Europe, exchanging pepper, ivory, and art for textiles, metals, and unfortunately, firearms. But this contact also brought danger. Over time, as European empires grew hungrier for control and profit, relationships turned exploitative. By the 19th century, the Kingdom of Benin was resisting British colonial demands. In 1897, after a diplomatic incident, the British launched a full-scale invasion. They burned the city, looted its treasures, and exiled the Oba. The kingdom's vast archives of bronze, ivory, and coral were shipped to museums across Europe. And yet, Benin never disappeared. The bronzes, even in exile, kept the kingdom's memory alive. They challenged false ideas about African art and society. They stood as proof that long before colonization, Africa had cities, kings, and a vision of beauty all its own. Today, efforts to return the stolen treasures are underway. Museums are beginning to acknowledge their histories, and communities in Nigeria are restoring what was taken. The descendants of the Obas still live in Benin City. The palace has been rebuilt. The voices of the ancestors echo once again through the courtyards. And tonight, you can hear them too. Let your mind wander down the red dust roads. Hear the beating of drums in the distance. See the flicker of firelight on polished bronze. Somewhere in the silence, a craftsman etches history into metal. Somewhere in the shadows, the spirit of the Oba watches over his people. Benin is not lost. It lives in its art, in its walls, and in the stories whispered beneath the West African stars. As the last stars fade above the Sahara and the first light of dawn touches the waters of the Niger River, the world of Songhai begins to stir. Long ago, this was a land of rivers and empires, of desert caravans and wisdom passed from one tongue to the next. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, the wind carries you to the banks of the Niger, to the great cities, golden courts, and scholarly halls of the empire of Songhai. The Songhai people lived for centuries near the middle bend of the Niger River, a region where desert meets savanna and trade routes meet waterways. They were fishers, farmers, and warriors. But in the 15th century, under visionary kings, they would rise far beyond their riverside settlements and build one of the largest empires in African history. You enter this world during the reign of Sunni Ali, a ruler of strength and fire. Sunni Ali was not a poet king. He was a conqueror, fierce, strategic, and determined. He united fragmented regions, drove back threats, and took control of vital cities like Timbuktu and Jenny. Under his leadership, Songhai became not just a kingdom, but an empire. His armies rode fast horses, and his war canoes glided across the river like shadows. Sunni Ali was a complex figure, both admired and feared. Oral traditions call him both tyrant and protector. He respected Islam, but also honored the traditional spirits of the land. In his reign, tolerance was political. He ruled a diverse people with many beliefs. And though his methods were sometimes harsh, his vision was lasting. After his death, the empire passed to Askia Muhammad, a man of faith, learning, and administration. Askia was not a warrior in the same way, but he built an empire with laws, scholars, and scribes. He reformed taxation, built roads, and standardized weights and measures. He declared Islam the official religion and made a famous pilgrimage to Mecca, following the footsteps of Mansa Musa generations earlier. It was during Askia's rule that Songhai reached its greatest height. From the Atlantic Ocean to the borders of present-day Niger and Nigeria, the empire stretched wide. Its wealth came from gold, salt, cloth, cola nuts, and slaves. Caravans moved across the Sahara, guided by stars and memory, bringing goods and ideas from North Africa, Arabia, and beyond. But more than trade or war, Songhai was known for its cities of learning. In Timbuktu, scholars gathered in libraries filled with manuscripts, works on astronomy, mathematics, its medicine, poetry, and law. At Sankore University, teachers taught students from across West Africa. Books were copied by hand, passed from generation to generation. These were not myths, they still exist. Written in flowing Arabic, they show a world of deep thought and curiosity. Imagine a quiet courtyard beneath the shade of date palms. A teacher, wrapped in indigo robes, reads from a leather-bound book. His students listen, ask questions, and take notes on wooden tablets. Knowledge, not conquest, becomes the true legacy of Songhai. But even the strongest river changes course. In the late 16th century, cracks began to show. Internal rivalries weakened the empire. The Moroccan Sultan, seeking control of the gold trade, sent an army across the desert, armed with muskets and cannon. In 1591, the Battle of Tondibi marked the end. The Songhai army, brave but outmatched, fell. The empire collapsed, its cities looted, its scholars scattered. Yet even in ruin, Songhai left behind echoes. The manuscripts remained, buried, hidden, but safe. The people endured. The river kept flowing. And now, as the night deepens and your breath slows, picture the Niger under moonlight. Hear the water lapping softly against stone embankments. See the silhouette of a boat drifting in silence, its rower humming an old tune. The empire is gone, but the memory remains, in books, in ruins, in the minds of those who remember. Songhai was not only an empire of gold and glory, it was a bridge between desert and forest, past and future, wisdom and power. And tonight, it rocks you to sleep on the currents of time.